Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's Thursday, June 23rd, 2022. And breaking news all over the planet in South Africa where it's no more masks. Yay! For now. For now. And here in the United States where a centuries-old handgun concealed carry law has been struck down by the Supreme Court just within the last hour. Ladies and gentlemen, somewhere deep in the heart of Gauteng in a Rondeville, which we can't identify for fear of his life, it's DearSA, the leader of a terrorist organization, Rob Hutchinson. Rob, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going? What an intro! What an intro! I expected crowds to be cheering and everything else, but I guess in a rondel, that doesn't happen. There's no space.
No, there's no space. It's too small. It's all enclosed. Yeah. So anyway, but welcome, Rob. Listen, with all the breaking news, I dug this out. I've got the handbook from the National Coronavirus Command Council right here. This book is the handbook that they've been using for their regulations. It's titled The Book of Useless Information.
Brilliant. I think that's edition 1, though.
Yes, that's the first chapter. That's one chapter, not an edition. So listen, let's get right into it, Rob. Answer the question. Do you think that South African public response to the health regulation amendments had any impact on Joe Paula and the Department of Health's decision to scrap this effort this week? Or are you more cynical and you think it's all about Cyril's secret stash at Pala and we're looking for distractions? Or maybe a little bit of both? Answer the question, Rob Hutchinson.
I think it's got nothing. I don't think it's got anything to do with Cyril Ramaphosa or Ramasofa, as you so brilliantly named him.
Chief who hides his money in furniture.
Exactly. Big chief full of bull. Yeah. That's the one.
Aidez-moi! Medic! Carmen!
Oh, no, that's exactly it. No, I think it was due to pressure from the public, from many civil organizations that have actually taken government to court, filed papers, and set court dates. In fact, the judge president combined all of our cases into one, and that was about 4 or 5 groups that were all combined into one. And that placed considerable pressure.
Load shedding!
Back on.
Ladies and gentlemen, brought to you proudly by state-owned parastatal Eskom. You too can be in the dark. Let your food rot in the fridge. Let your medication vaccines expire. And the respirator for grandma will stop. It's okay. Clear! Poof! She's back. Go ahead, Rob.
She's back. It's only for 2 hours. She can last for that long.
Exactly. What's oxygen deprivation for 2 hours? ANC leadership has had it for 28 years.
Exactly. No wonder they don't feel the effects of load shedding.
Exactly.
Okay, it's going to become clearer. Yeah. So back to the answering that question. It's definitely due to pressure from civil society. They first started their underhand tactics. Remember calling us terrorists and saboteurs, and that's obviously to pave the way. They didn't want to go to court, and they've clearly shown that they do not want to go to court for fear of losing this case and having egg on their faces. However, there is still the other court case that is still filed and still pending, and that is to get rid of what we call the draft regulations. So they've got rid of the interim regulations, or what they call the limited regulations, but now it's the draft regulations which are on the table. And I suspect the same procedure will happen. The more pressure we apply, the more likely they will withdraw before going to court. An interesting one, Chris, is that recently the Dlamini Zuma was hit with a cost order. Which she has to pay herself. It's a personal cost order. Now, that is good news because the state uses our money to fight us in court, which is ridiculous. So hopefully now that they will take more caution and think twice before taking civil society to court, and maybe that's also a reason why they withdrew the regulations today. Maybe our esteemed Minister of Health doesn't want to go to court and lose and then have to pay the costs thereof. He'll be a very poor man indeed if that had to happen.
Well, I don't know that this has any impact on it, but I think that the few rational voices that remain in the ANC, and there's got to be at least one or two. I mean, come on. Just the statistical odds are that somebody can walk and chew gum in that party. They can't all be demented lunatic thieves and racketeers. But let's just assume 20 years ago, you had rational voices. Trevor Manuel was there. You had voices like that. Montante, the guy who was the caretaker president, he's kind of a rational voice. And there's others. But let's presume there's a couple rational voices in the ANC, and they're probably going, wait a second. Did you see Malema's testimony? You don't really want to go to court. What are you going to argue? We use scientific evidence. What scientific evidence? Where's your study? What information you have to show that tobacco exacerbates when people hadn't even heard of corona 6 weeks prior? You're going to tell us you had scientific information to prove that people that smoked were more likely? No. So it's the same thing here. They're not. What are they going to take to court? What are they going to say? Well, no. That's the embarrassment. So like anything else in the ANC, they want to stretch out the Look at Jacob Zuma. He'll never serve a jail. Escort was a holiday for him the time he showed up there. It was a grandstanding exhibition. That's all it was. And just like Carl Nyhorst, yes, I know that's not the correct pronunciation. Just like Carl Nyhorst, who went outside the court and was protesting after. Remember that? He was outside there. They've arrested our dear leader illegitimately. And up comes Saps and lead him off into prison. Okay, first off, that was illegitimate. Why is he the only one? He's the only one being harassed. There are hundreds of people there. It was because he's Carl Nyhorst. but I mean, look, they're trying to avoid. By the way, I do need to interject here, Rob. I noticed that you said you only have load shedding for 2 hours. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that white privilege does exist in South Africa. Rob only got 2 hours. My cousin, who's colored, got 6 hours of load shedding. I'm just saying.
Wow, there you go. Maybe there's a minister living in my area here.
That might explain it. That explains it.
Yeah, but then it's more likely that we wouldn't get load shedding at all.
At all,
and
exactly.
there are some reasons that or some areas that don't get any load shedding, and I guarantee you there's some top official living in that area and said, don't switch my area off. That's how it is. Amazing how they can be selective in rolling blackouts.
No doubt about it. Listen, we did a broadcast on Monday, which you were the guest, not a co-host, so I could ask you questions about what had been an exclusive, but then you kind of gave it away to the rest of the media. But anyway, no, we had an exclusive there to talk about your organization being called a domestic terrorist organization and undermining democracy and sabotaging the public participation process, which is kind of your whole reason for existing, is not to sabotage, but to facilitate. So we did that. You were a guest on Monday. And wow, look at this. Joe Paula does me a solid, man. Today he ends the mask, and here we are talking about it, a case you had brought. But let's be clear about this, Rob. Let me make sure I'm straight and jump in here. All right, so the important distinction when you read the letter that was circulated, it was leaked to the media, is we want to suspend Regulation 16, 17, 18 for now. For now. That clause at the end of the sentence. So, folks, if you think this is over, you are sadly mistaken. I'm not predicting that we'll come back to mask and PCR tests to come in the country and only 6 people can go to a funeral on a third Thursday of every 5th month. I'm not predicting that. But what I am telling you is that they are drunk with power. And they're not alone. Boris Johnson, Emmanuel Macron, Vladimir Putin, Volodymyr Zelensky, Joe Biden, all of these jackals. And let's not forget little Juicy Trudeau up there, the blackface, racist in Canada. They're all, Mr. Ed, Jacinda Ardern, down there in New Zealand. They're all drunk with power. They have been able to expand the power of the state into the realm of your personal liberty, to the point where they've taken away your relatives' lives. They've taken away your livelihoods. They've taken and restricted you and criminalized 400,000 South Africans criminalized in the first 6 months of the lockdown. This is an aphrodisiac that they're not going to easily let go of. So for now is key distinction. And this can come back at any time. And more importantly, this was just the temporary measures that they didn't even have the legal authority to implement in the first place. There's nothing in the Emergency Powers or the Disaster Management Act that gives them authority to go, well, you know what, we need 30 days just to, for a bridging operation here. That doesn't exist. They claim that right for themselves. So they've just gotten rid of the illegal things they were doing in that case, but they still have the regulations to Healthcare Act, and that's your court case. So don't breathe easy, South Africa, but I will make this prediction. I think it's a solid prediction, Rob. There's no way they're putting South Africans back in facial coverings after this. There's no way. They'll never be able to implement this. It'll never happen, even with their willing accomplices in the white monopoly capital sector in industry and in retail stores, kicking people out of stores. I mean, listen, Edgar's, you want to kick people out of your bankrupt stores who are going to spend money there because they don't have a face covering on? Foot sack.
Exactly. I think those are excellent points that you do raise, and absolutely true as well. Although they have said they might bring it back, and they're fully entitled to, if they reinstate the Disaster Management Act, then they can actually bring regulations back. But that's the whole point of us actually going to court. We're continuing with the court case. We are making sure that these regulations do not return in some mystical format under any other law. And if they do, if they want to bring them back, then it has to be put out for public consultation and has to undergo parliamentary oversight. But yes, you're right. I do believe that there is something on the horizon. It just seems rather too easy. And perhaps it's monkeypox. We don't know. As they released it, as they said, no more masks, suddenly there was the first reported case of monkeypox floating.
Yes, did you see? Yeah, you saw that today. The first case is reported. Look, I'm not worried, Rob, because I've got the scar-inducing jab as a young child against smallpox, and then I got the oral vaccine against smallpox as a service member when I came military. So I'm good to go. If you've got immunity against the smallpox, you're good against the monkeypox. You know, the modern concept of medicine and vaccinations all started, of course, with Edward Jenner, who was a physician in England, who noticed that despite people getting smallpox everywhere in the 18th century, the milkmaids didn't seem to get it. Why? Because they all contracted cowpox, which is dangerous for cattle, but has very little impact on human beings. And so because of the similarity in the RNA, they developed a natural immunity to smallpox. And he used live, cowpox to vaccinate people by scraping the skin back in the 18th century. And that's how we discovered vaccines. That's how it came about. I mean, it's a crazy story, but it's a true story. And to this day, if similar genesis and species here in the same family there, you've got monkeypox related to smallpox and cowpox. And if you have had either of the others, you are golden, man. So bring it on.
Brilliant. Yes, no more lockdowns, or only lockdowns for those who believe it. But it's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, but I can see something coming back without a doubt.
Well, come on, man, Cowabunga! It's the sixth wave, dude. It's coming. I mean, he already told us last week the sixth wave is approaching. How do they know this? How do they know? There's no data. How can you take data that says, okay, the number of cases are declining, number of fatalities are declining, the number of positive tests are declining, the sixth wave will be here in 3 months? How do you predict that? What kind of science is that? Dominus hominus impactum. What's that?
Yeah, not only in 6 months, but they actually predict the day on the 15th of July. It'll be here at 7:45 a.m. Make sure that you're indoors when it does come. I don't know. It's all based on absolute rubbish, and it's not a prediction. I see them as threats. Do
you know what?
If you don't behave, we'll introduce the sixth wave.
Do you know what I blame this all on? Why the sheep are so vulnerable to persuasion? It's all those damn zombie movies.
Indeed. The walking mask.
That's right. Feel the fear of the walking mask. That's what it is. It's zombie movies, man. It's Fear the Walking Dead. That's why all the sheep believe this stuff. They just fall for everything. So,
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
That's funny.
Yikes. Anyway, so yeah. Hey, so let's shift gears a little bit to the States there, Rob. We'll come back to South Africa because, I mean, we can't downplay this. This is exciting news because it's not just the mask. It's also the requirement for PCR or proof of vaccination to enter the country. Gone. It's also the restrictions on gatherings. Gone. Which would have been nice last Saturday in Cape Town. So instead of 31,000 enthusiastic Bulls and Stormers fans, we could have 55,000 and proven that South African rugby can exist. I'm so angry about that. The deputy mayor of Cape Town, a former Springbok, basically pleaded with Ramaphosa and the government. They just ignored him. They already knew they were going to lift this thing. They already knew it last week, but they intentionally held it until after the URC final. These people are sick. They're demented. They don't care. What impact would it have had to have rescinded that restriction in Cape Town on Saturday? None whatsoever. Vice doing it today, or actually, technically, it was done yesterday. It just was announced today. So come on, man, that's crazy.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely crazy. The question is, why did he listen to national government? I wouldn't have. What would be the consequence?
Well, yeah, exactly. What are they going to do? Come arrest the other 24,000 people? Good luck with that. Good luck with that.
Exactly.
You can't even get enough.
Show them account.
Yeah, you can't get enough.
It's not 52,000. It's 31,000.
No, it's an optical illusion. We've used the camera. We've used pixelated people in the upper rows. They're not really there. This is from 1995.
Exactly.
Different stadium, but you get the point. Anyway, yeah, no. Okay, so I was going to say, let's switch to the States. Breaking news, just over an hour ago now, I did a 1-minute short. By the way, my shorts are doing really well. No, not the ones I wear, my video shorts. They're doing quite well, including the one. Now, this is funny, Rob, before I tell you about the SCOTUS decision. So I did this video in Houston when I was actually in the car. I was driving. I just put the phone up on the dash and hit the button for record. I was driving. And I said, it's crazy. I got here and it was $4.19 a gallon at 5:30 in the morning. I topped off a few hours later. It was $4.25. Then it was 10 cents higher later that next morning or that evening. And then when I left the following morning, so within a little over 24 hours, the price had gone up 4 times. And I told this story in a minute video. People are posting stuff on the left come on and go, are all Republicans this dumb? Okay, what thing did I assert? What fact did I claim? What analysis did I give? All I gave was my personal experience of watching the prices rise 4 times in 24 hours. How does that make me dumb? These leftists can't even insult you properly. I just saw this thing where this guy attacks Ronaldo because he's talking about YouTube. We get to that a little bit later on, but anyway, so it's comical to see the dearth of intellectual capacity amongst a lot of these keyboard warriors that really have no intellectual capacity. I mean, they can't even insult you in a proper fashion. It makes no sense. But here in the last hour, the United States Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision. So as the media likes to say, the conservative justices, as I like to correct the record and say, the 5 conservative justices and John Roberts, the pretend conservative who went along for the ride, 6-3 decision struck down a New York law that was a century old, which required anyone who wanted to have a concealed carry permit to demonstrate a justifiable need to have it. Now, the Supreme Court, in a decision, said that violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. 14th Amendment was added to our Constitution to ensure that all former enslaved people received and guaranteed the same rights and privileges as any other citizen and made them citizens. So it made citizenship for naturally born folks who had been slaves. Now they're citizens. And of course, in the future, anyone else is naturally born here. And it guaranteed everyone the same rights. Now, the left loves to use the Equal Protection Clause to create fictional rights like abortion. That's not a right, and it also violates the Constitution. But they use the Equal Protection Clause to contort the argument and win that case. So the irony here is that the Equal Protection Clause was used by the conservative majority to say that it violates our Second Amendment right. And they're correct. So now New York can no longer force people to give a reason to apply for a concealed carry permit. Wow. We're going to see explosion of concealed carry permits in New York here very soon. Good luck with that, bureaucracy.
That is good news. I think that's absolutely brilliant. And long may it continue and spread to other areas as well. It's wonderful. There's no doubt that you need to look after yourself, and personal protection is the only way to do that. Similar things are happening in South Africa. There was a news article today about a study that was done about women who are empowering themselves through registering for firearm licenses and obviously obtaining firearms, and that is brilliant. That is the way it should be. Instead of bringing men down and trying to change the behavior of men, which is ingrained. Let's face it. You should empower women so that men think twice before they act against a woman. Is she carrying a weapon? Can she attack me? Will she be able to defend herself? Well, if the suspicion is there, the chances of the perpetrator actually going forward with his action is a lot less than if he knows that she isn't carrying one. So absolutely, I think it's a great deterrent for crime, and something that is definitely needed both in New York and in South Africa. And the concealed option just makes that situation a whole lot better. If you're not sure if someone is carrying, then you're going to assume that they are, if the law allows for it. So What a great deterrent. Yeah.
Yeah, no, can you read that?
Yes.
Okay. Wake, not woke. I don't know if the audience can see it because it looks kind of small on my screen. But yeah, no, absolutely. So here's the thing. It always irritates when we get to this gender-based violence argument in South Africa. Why are we always being condescended to as men, being told that we have to clean up our act? Isn't it a societal failure? I mean, don't these people have mothers? Didn't they discipline these people when they were small to teach them respect to others, including women and girls? I'm really sick of being condescended to when I don't abuse women and I don't mistreat women and I don't treat them unfairly or differently. And I have to hear this constant nonsense about how it's men's responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility to clean up this mess. It's everyone's mess. And I'm sick of hearing this. And it just comes from these demonic leftists who always want to blame someone else. Usually they're deflecting their own shortcomings. They're probably the bigots and the ones that abuse their spouses and girlfriends and the women. So what you're talking about is deterrence, absolutely. But it's not just that. It's also a well-trained person who knows how to respect, properly use, properly carry, properly store, and engage with a firearm without freaking out. That makes all the difference in the world. I saw a video several months ago of a young lady in Pretoria who pulled up and was in a driveway, and they drove up in the street, and they came up, and they just started opening fire and shooting at her. But, of course, they have no discipline because they're just criminals. And she doesn't flinch. She reaches for her hip, pulls her firearm, takes a firing position, and she unloads, and they run away. She's alive because she had a firearm, and she knew how to use it. We never see these stories. We never see these reports. The story down there, the report was in Texas, thing it was, or maybe it wasn't Texas, but I covered this a couple weeks ago, where this guy walks into, he's a black guy. That's not really germane to the story, but just to describe what's going on. It's a black guy who walks into a classroom on firearm safety. People have their firearms in there. They're not loaded, of course, because they're in a classroom. So one of the guys wants to go to the restroom. So it's all on camera. He puts his you don't see this portion, but they should explain later. He puts his firearm in his rucksack, which is under a seat, and he goes to the restroom. They're all on break. Some guy walks in, sits down nonchalantly at where his table was, and he might have been in the back room. We don't know. But anyway, he sits down. He starts rifling through his rucksack, trying to steal his firearm. Other people come over and go, hey, what are you doing here? And then the guy that owns the rucksack comes back in, and so he walks out. Well, what do? They call law enforcement because someone tried to steal a firearm. So they call. He's outside, I don't know, waiting for his getaway vehicle or a ride or something like that. Up comes a law enforcement vehicle with 2 police officers in it. They get out, both sides of the vehicle. They walk over towards him, and they start asking questions. And it looks like they're getting ready to arrest him. And he pulls a screwdriver out and lunges at the female officer, stabbing her in the neck several times, and then hitting the body armor. She had body armor, but did get her in the neck. And she falls to the ground, but she isn't to the ground immediately. So the police officer assumes a firing position because he can't engage. I mean, it's dangerous. And then 3 of the people from the classroom come running out into the street as the guy tries to flee, and they take firing positions and they just unload it. That was the St. Valentine's Day massacre, man. He got shot by 4 different people, including the cop. The point is, people with firearms. Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The cop actually did try to physically get her off her without the firearm, and then did manage to get her free, and the guy ran away. Those 3 guys had come out. They assumed a position. Once the cops were clear, the guy turned at them and they fired and lit him up. So the point is, they never talk about all the lives saved because of lawful, proper use of firearms. Not to mention all the turkey and deer and springbok we get to eat because of them.
Absolutely true. And great biltong that comes from that.
Exactly.
Sorry, beef jerky for those who don't know what biltong is.
It's not the same, Rob. It's not. There's a close corollary, but there's not the same. The biltong is so much better. Yeah.
Biltong's brilliant. Yes.
It is.
One of the good things that came from South Africa, without a doubt. Yeah.
There's lots of good things that came from South Africa. We got rugby. It didn't come from South Africa, but it was perfected there.
Okay. Don't let the British hear you say that.
Well, let's see how they do in World Cups. Oh, that hurts. 2003, their last victory in the World Cup and their only World Cup victory. Anyway.
The only one. Yeah, no, it's amazing. There's some absolute lunatics out there, definitely. I mean, what was he thinking, really? Approaching a training class, and then really that must have been absurd. and then stabbing a police officer
in the neck. It's
Why?
with a screwdriver. Because these people, when I say these people, you little hate wankers, don't assume I'm talking about black folks. I'm talking about people who break the law. These people who break the law do so with impunity because people aren't prosecuted or they're not raised properly. And, look, I grew up in all kinds of circumstances, including foster homes and far from ideal circumstances. And I didn't grow up with a lack of respect for life. I served in uniform, fought in war, and I have the utmost respect for life, whether it's, plants growing in my yard or it's a Homo sapien, a fellow Homo sapien. This callous disregard for humans. I mean, one of the most heinous ones I saw was last year, the guy in the tuck shop there, or a little there's not tuck shop, there's another name for it. Spaza, is that the word? Spaza? Something like that? Yeah. A little Spaza right there in Pretoria. And he's an Indian fella. He's just standing there. He's got his hands behind, in front of him, behind his back. He's just standing in the doorway, waiting for business to come in. Guy walks up to the door. It's all on camera. Puts a gun to his head and just shoots and kills him. And walks around behind the counter, opens the till, and takes a few rand and leaves. What?
A total disrespect for life.
What allows a person to mature in a fashion they have so little regard for someone's life? That young man was someone's father or someone's brother or someone's son, and someone nurtured that person to adulthood. We don't know if that young man was a good or bad person, but that's not germane. No one deserves that fate. It's like the torture of people on farms that goes on, using, branding irons and heating coils and pliers and axes and gang raping children in front of their parents and then cutting babies' throats. I mean, this isn't made up. These are true stories from farm invasions in South Africa. What kind of ghoulish attitude is that? And now, I know what's going on there. That's intentional. That's terrorism. That's meant to frighten people off of farms. And it is working to some degree. Of course, there's no one backfilling to keep those farms operational or to replace them. So it's really sad. But I mean, how do people become so psychotic and antisocial? It's really frightening. It truly is.
I think it's a slow process of dehumanizing the supposed person or person who's causing all your grief. And we've seen politicians do that quite regularly here in South Africa. Single out a minority, communicate that they are responsible for all your hardships, whether your hardships are real or imaginary, and then persecute them, dehumanize them, and then it becomes easy. You're no longer dealing with another human being who has feelings the same as yours. You're dealing with another species entirely, and therefore they feel nothing about hunting an animal and torturing and so on. It's sad because I find it amazing how it's never just one individual. It's a group or quite a large group of individuals. They can't possibly all think the same way. So therefore it must be some sort of indoctrination that actually creates that mindset. And it can't be mob mentality either, because it's a planned event. Mob mentality is generally spontaneous. So what is actually going on there? Who's indoctrinating these people and how are they doing it? Well, I don't know. I think it's through political ideology and to a large extent the media as well, downplaying such serious events when they should be actually telling the truth and bringing everything to the surface. That makes people think twice. If it's made front page news, then it must be bad, because the newspapers never actually communicate good news, now do they? So,
well, they certainly don't do it very often. That's for sure. It is really a sad situation, because we go on for hours and hours about. I can give you examples of cases I report on just a few years about how the media is dishonest. I mean, Asian hate crimes. Asian hate crimes are up this much and that in America. There are 9 million Asian Americans, and probably about 12 million now. 12 million, and there were 3,400 reported hate crimes to the government through all reporting agencies, and that's what the FBI puts in statistics. Now, one hate crime is bad. Of course, to me, all crimes are hate. You don't commit crimes against people you love, right? I mean, we're exceptions, but they're all hate crimes to me. So I take exception with that description. But let's go with that description. So the reason this came about is because they had that wacko with the sexual dysfunction who shot the prostitutes in Atlanta, and that became the new sexy lie to tell about Asian hate crimes. But when they delved into it, the media, because they did look into it after they started reporting on it breathlessly. They quickly found out that the vast majority of hate crimes directed against Asians are committed by Black Americans. Oops. Story died. Story died.
I'm sure it did. Yeah, they can't communicate that.
Well, there was a thing. What was this guy said? The West Point. West Point's got this critical race theory now, and that's been exposed. We heard about this last year, but Judicial Watch, which is a civil rights organization here, tries to expose, government malfeasance, among other things. But Judicial Watch did a Freedom of Information Act request, a FOIA, as we call them by the acronym. And for West Point, they asked for all the emails between the leaders, the generals, and the colonels who were teaching and running the institution, and the course material, and they got it. Oh my goodness. One of the slides, a PowerPoint slide, has all these data points. It says things like, I've got it here, but handy, but let me look, see if I can find it real quick, and it'd just be easier to explain this if I do it that way. Otherwise, I'm doing it from memory. Hang on a second here. Come on. Oh, now it wants to be slow. Any other time. Yeah, accessing a drive. So, yeah, West Point. Here you go. Okay, this is the one. Okay, so I got it now. So these are some things they say. Blacks are less likely than whites to have a college education. That's true. Receive recommended medical screening tests. That may be true. I don't know the answer on that one, because how do you judge that? Which cases you take and receive bank approval for housing mortgage. That's true. We can look at denials. Own their own homes. We can look at home ownership. That's true. Receive a job promotion. That one again. Okay. Blacks are more likely than whites to live below the poverty line. True. To be victims of a homicide. True. Mostly killed by blacks. And be incarcerated. True. Those are all true points. But every one of those data points, if you take Asian Americans and you put white Americans, the reason I mention this is because the slide is entitled, the big words on the slide are modern day slavery in the United States. They use those data points to claim that people are slaves. Black Americans are slaves in America. Now, every one of those data points, Americans who are white fall below Asians. So are white Americans modern day slaves to Asian Americans? See how asinine this stuff is? Absolutely ridiculous. To which somebody responded with just some gobbledygook nonsense response. And oh my goodness. He's like, well, most Asians are immigrants to America for education, job opportunities. I'm like, yeah, pretty much everybody who came to America came for those reasons, or religious persecution. That's the exception. An occasional refugee. But the Native Americans came here for opportunities. The bison, the giant sloth that they were hunting through the Bering Strait land bridge. They came here for opportunities too, as did the Spaniards and the French and the Dutch and the English and everybody. And the Germans, some came for religious persecution reasons. But I mean, come on. Asians came here and they're all recent immigrants. Really? We've had Asians in this country since the 18th century, and they're recent immigrants. Now, these people just, they take the cake there, Rob. I mean, the intellectual capacity of the one hazard about social media is that it lets any idiot have a voice.
Yeah, that's for sure. It does, including myself. But yeah, but you have to ask the question, Chris, and it's a big question to ask: is why is there racial classification in the first place?
Exactly. Why does it even matter?
Not just a homicide. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Why is it not just a homicide? Why is it a certain individual from a certain race committed this crime and it happens to be a homicide? Why not start with the premise that it's a homicide and leave it at that?
I agree with that. But from a standpoint as a leader of having an idea on how to solve these issues and wanting to solve them, that data for an analyst and for leaders is actually useful. It's not useful to bring it in the public context and rail about the media, but it is very useful to know, for instance, that 9 out of 10 homicides involving Black Americans occur in urban centers in specific socioeconomic strata. Okay? So clearly there is an economic issue or a cultural issue that's tied to Chester in Southeast Philadelphia, or center of Baltimore near Druid Hill Park, things like that. So that data is useful for where the clusters of crimes occur. They never talk about that. Black Americans are, many more times likely to die in homicide than white Americans. True. But they're shot in pretty much the same geographic locations. Most Black Americans are not dying on rural farms in Montana or Alabama. They're dying in Philadelphia, Chicago. There's a problem here, and it's important to understand that and know it. Most white Americans, I don't know where they're dying. They're dying all over, but you do have rural murders there too. So it is useful from that standpoint. But I'm in 100% agreement with you that the first thing we see is if it's a Black person who's dead, that comes up. If the assailant is black, that's just hidden by the media. Either report it or don't report it. Be consistent is my issue with this. And that's why I expose this fraud all the time. They constantly try to present a narrative to mislead people in the media. So for instance, in this country, the number of white men who rape black women is infinitesimally small. Thank goodness. No one should be raped. That's a terrible thing. But the number of white women raped by black men, it's in the tens of thousands every year, and that's not reported, although the data is available. The press doesn't talk about it. That's not even an issue. When they talk about murder, they talk about firearms, they're dishonest about that too. They're talking about where it goes. So I agree with you. It shouldn't be the lead point. I only use that topic to expose hypocrisy, and I do it all the time.
Yeah. And that hypocrisy is easy to spot.
Oh, so
and
easy.
And the media play, as you say, play a great hand in this. And it's definitely to drive a certain narrative. And what is the end game? What do you think is the end game in this? Why do they do it?
Well, what gets me is that I'm really honestly, a little confused as to where we are right now. Let me explain why. Democrats control everything in this country except some state legislatures. So the majority of those are actually controlled by Republicans. So that's something they're bumhurt about. And they don't control the Supreme Court, but they do control much of the federal court system. I mean, you go to the Ninth Circuit Court and they have ludicrous rulings in violation of the Constitution all the time that have to be appealed. So they have the House, they have the Senate. They can pretty much write any policy they want. So I'm a little confused as to why they're going down this four-legged chair for the November elections, unless it's just to win, because they're focused on transgenders. They're focused on geez, I lost track of all four of these things now. But there's four points I had here last night on my radio program. I was talking about that. But the point is that guns, yeah, abortion, guns, mass shootings, abortions, transgender, and there was one other, and that's what they're focused on. Now they control everything already, but of course this year they're focused on.
I just want to point out. I just want to point out that all those 4 points, or those 4 points, are emotionally driven and emotionally charged.
Yes,
and that is the key of any sort of left movement. Is it has to have an emotional charge to it, an emotional response, or trigger an emotional response. And because once people are in an emotional state, they stop thinking logically.
Fair point.
Then you highlight the problems constantly, you drive those emotions, and then you present a solution or so-called solution, which is only achievable if you're voted into power. Standard tactic of the
leftist. Yeah, well, standard tactic of the Soviets and everyone else. No, you make a very good point there, and it also explains that asinine comment on my video in which I made no policy position, no analysis, attacked no leaders, made no claims, simply said, man, gas prices went up 4 times in 24 hours. It's crazy. And called me dumb for that. I mean, that's obviously it's an emotional response because he felt that his leftist friends were under assault. Apparently, that was his inference, which was invalid. But yeah, no, they're these topics. You're right; they evoke emotion, and reason goes out the window. You can't have a coaching conversation with people who simply want to push emotional buttons, and that's what it's all about. For instance, there was this point. This Kroger, which is a big supermarket chain like Checkers, it's huge. It's in the Midwest, but I didn't know it was in Texas. I saw it in Texas recently, and I didn't even know they're in North Carolina because I grew up with them in Ohio. They're Midwestern. It's for German family. They're all over. Big company like Safeway. Anyway, and Checkers. Anyway, so and ShopRite, I suppose. So they're big, and 7 years ago, in one of the states that has open carry, for firearms, you can carry a firearm, not concealed carry. You can walk in the store with them. People complain, these people walking here with guns, and Kroger's CEO said, that's the state law. We're just following state law. People are welcome in our stores to open carry their firearms, that's the law. So they stood by Second Amendment then. But this week, Kroger and Harris Teeter, I'm not sure if they own them. That's one of those leftists. Ooh, I pay $18 for a quarter ounce of butter because I'm special, rich, and white. Anyway, that's what Harris Teeter is. Anyway, overpriced beyond belief. So Harris Teeter, and I don't know the relationship. They might have been bought out or something. But Kroger, there's 2 stores. There were these beer cozies. They're called. I don't know why they call them cozies, but that's the little sleeve you put a beer in to keep it cold. Beer cozies had a picture of Thomas Jefferson on it with a rifle and, talking about the Second Amendment. And one of the customers went to Kroger and complained about it. And they tweeted about it and said, well, why do you allow this stuff? And Kroger pulled these products from their stores. Just pulled all the products. Now,
That's ridiculous.
she said, 40,000 Americans are killed every year by guns. Why do you allow this? Okay, first off, 40,000 Americans aren't killed every year anywhere by anything. Maybe by stupidity from leftists, we die of exhaustion, but 40,000 Americans aren't killed. Statistics before the Summer of Love in 2020, when many people were murdered by leftists all over America in their mostly peaceful demonstrations, we had 14,000 murders in the U.S. That compared to 18,000 in South Africa, country 1/6 of our size. So 14,000. Of that, there were about 9,000, 10,000 firearm-related murders. So that's far short of 40,000 by about 300%. 400%. So, but the point is, you're spot on. Emotion. 40,000 Americans killed. 100 Americans are killed every day. No, not even remotely true. And it's the same thing when it comes to race. You just lie about everything. So, excuse me, Kamala Harris went to the African American History Museum on the Mall on Juneteenth holiday the other day. And she said, America, we have slavery for 400 years. Excuse me, Kamala, you need to work on your math. That's kind of like a member of the ANC going to Parliament saying, we have been subjected to this ever since Jan van Riebeck came here and enslaved us 2,000 years ago. 2,000? What kind of math is she using? Is that Common Core math? No, but, let's see.
True story, by the way.
Yeah. Jan van Riebeck came 2,000 years ago. Very true story, yeah. Yeah, of course, the Bantu peoples hadn't even reached South Africa 2,000 years ago. They didn't arrive till 1,600 years ago. So I'm really not sure what planet that ANC member's on, but they just believe all their nonsense without any facts. So the first people of African origin who were enslaved in America occurred in Jamestown, commonly accepted, in 1619. In fact, they've got this whole leftist, racist project called the 1619 Project to commemorate that date in 1619. Well, my 17th great uncle was the first royal governor of the Jamestown colony and arrived in 1621. So anyway, I have a tie back there. But there was a Dutch ship that intercepted a Portuguese slaver headed to Brazil or the Caribbean, took some of the slaves as, part of their bounty, and then didn't know what to do with them. So they sailed into Jamestown. Here, we'll sell you these Africans. They sold them. So that starts bondage here in America. But that wasn't the United States. That wasn't America. That was an English colony in Jamestown. Okay? And we already had indigenous tribes here who already had slaves of their own. That's forgotten conveniently by Kamala Harris. And then that's 1619. Well, we became a country in 1776 when we declared our independence from the British, those evil British, the cockies, on July 4th, 1776. So 1865, the 13th Amendment ended legal slavery in this country, enacted on the 6th of December. That's 89 years. So not quite 400, Kamala. 400.
Her math skills are
just a little bit.
They're probably on par with Biden's bike riding skills.
Well, listen, Rob.
She tends to fall over.
Oh, okay, that's a good line actually. But I mean, I was going to say I'm not giving Biden a hard time for his bike riding skills. I mean, the guy's 79. The fact he was riding a bike, I'm actually impressed. I mean, I hope I can ride a bike at 79. So, I mean, the fact that he misstepped on the pedal when all these sycophants rushed up to him, it's probably their fault that he fell. So I don't actually make fun of for Biden. Now, I'll make fun of him for falling up the stairs. I mean, I get falling down the stairs, but falling up the stairs is a remarkable achievement. Clearly, there's something wrong there. But I will make fun of that, but I won't make fun of the bicycle. But what I will make fun of and take issue with is that now, my colleague last night who worked in the Trump administration on Common Sense Conservatives, he said that Todd McKinley said that, well, you got to understand that these are all plants. They put these people there. But what I'm talking about is that when he came up to stop riding the bike, dozens of people rushed up like he's freaking the Beatles. Oh, Mr. President. Oh, and they're taking pictures and trying to get autographs. I'm like, are you seriously high? This demented lunatic who doesn't have mental faculties of a freaking 2-day-old chicken that's been hatched out of an egg, this clown who's destroying this country, this man who wants to lead us into war, this idiot who, well, I told them they wouldn't get the aid unless they fired that prosecutor. And son of a bitch, he was fired. Yeah, this guy. Yeah, come on, man. This guy, you're sycophants for. Look, I mean, if you want to be a sycophant, I'd recommend Rihanna. At least she's hot looking and she can sing. So go do that, okay? Come on, man.
Absolutely.
That's my issue is the idiots running up to him. Yep.
I think they'll probably rent a crowd. You got to have the press look like he's popular and people want to get his autograph and everything else and have their photo taken with him and selfies and so on. it was all a stage. In fact, everything in politics is always a stage. There's first of all, why did the Secret Service even allow people close up to him? Come on.
Exactly. Well, because they're all plants. They're all plants. Exactly. Yep. You know, it's funny because there's a super chat from John Jarvis. John, 35 Rand. Thank you for that. I'll get to it in just a moment. I want to make this point. But it is fascinating because during the presidential campaign and the choosing of 2020, Joe Biden would hold a press rally and there'd be like a dozen cars out there with people sitting in it, honking their horns. And they didn't get that showing the imagery of an empty lot with 12 cars in it for a guy who's been a senator for 36 years and a vice president for 8 years, and he can't draw flies even if he has feces hanging off his diaper. This is embarrassing. And meanwhile, they lie about Donald Trump. Donald Trump had a rally today in Western Pennsylvania. Some medium-sized crowd showed up. Medium-sized, 56,000 people, man. The WHO can't get people to show up in that numbers. 56,000 in a county that doesn't have a population of 56,000. People came from states all around to see that stuff. It's just, it's the cognitive dissonance is unbelievable. So John Jarvis says, you were often saying how bad globe leaders are. I know he's talking about me. I don't know if he means you too, Rob, but he says, who then, in your and Rob's opinion, is a good leader? So I think that John uses good English there. That's actually written well. So I did infer correctly. Yeah, I am the one saying things about globe leaders. Who are good leaders? Rob, you want to take a shot at that? Who do you think right now is a good leader in the world? Anyone?
Yeah. Jacinda Ardern. No, not at all. I think she's the worst.
Mr. Ed.
But it's difficult. That's a really difficult question to answer. I don't think there are any good leaders as such just yet. Yeah, I kind of point to Bolsonaro. I think he's quite a brave leader. Whether he's a good leader or not is up for debate, but brave enough to say what needs to be said. Any current leaders? No, I can't think of any offhand, to be dead honest. Yeah, that's quite
sad.
Terrifying.
It's sad. It's really sad. It's tragic, actually. So there's a couple comments here. Rusty says 83 million. Yeah, right. Rusty, I'm gonna correct you. It was 81 million, brother. 81 million.
Exactly. No.
Well, they're still counting here in Pennsylvania.
And
then Corona's boring, do the alien thing, says Rob Hutchinson is like January 6 times 10. He brings out the Buffalo guy in me. I have no idea what that means.
The Buffalo guy, the guy was arrested.
No, I know who they're talking about, but I mean, how does that evoke that? I think they're just having fun with you, Rob. Earlier, they said you look like an evil villain, and sometimes when you turn sideways, the way your beard is shaped, I think of Spy versus Spy. That's what I think of.
Absolutely. It's designed to intimidate, but it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. It's no. So here, well, mine will intimidate. Wait till I arrive at OR Tambo and the DERCO employees look at me and I'll look at my passport.
You better wear a red suit.
Yeah. Well, no. I'm going to wear khakis and a carabiner, and my name is Coustellaret. Die Leon van de West-Transvaal. They're going to wet their pants, man.
Absolutely, that'll be brilliant.
I'll walk off the plane and I'll walk off the plane with those little portable speakers attached to my carabiners, and I'll start playing Bok van Blerk's Delarey, ça comme you beau.
Oh, brilliant.
Oh, they'll pass out.
It'll go down well.
That's right.
Today I end up with a body cavity.
I was going to say, today at OR Tambo, the police reaction unit had to respond to a dangerous criminal. Yeah, I know, but so to answer the question on my part, Rob, I'm of the same opinion. I am hard-pressed to find a good leader on the world stage. Now, there are good leaders, but they're just not talked about. They're from relatively minor, small countries. But, I mean, let's run through the litany of some of these clowns. Okay, let's start at national level. I'm not a fan of Bolsonaro. I mean, he's okay, but I'm not a fan of Vlad Putin. Nope. Volodymyr Zelensky? Nope. Olaf Scholz in Germany? Nope. Emmanuel Macron in France? Nope. Boris Johnson? Oh, my gosh. Boris is being the biggest disappointment since, I don't know, I guess Cher.
Since Boris?
Since Boris, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and then Justin Trudeau, please.
Oh,
Cyril Ramaphosa.
Trudeau to me is the worst. Absolute worst.
Hage Caingab, Eric Masisi, Yoweri Museveni, Paul Kagame. I mean, these are just loser after loser. George Weah in Liberia, not as bad a loser, but he's just a soccer player that really doesn't know what he's doing. Japan has decent leadership, but no one ever talks about them. But not Australia or New Zealand. Jacinda Ardern, she is a lunatic, an absolute lunatic. I mean, I've done videos on her in which she talks about how, they tell you to get the jab, then she basically, the information she says without realizing, she tells you the jab doesn't work. Well, how are you trying to convince people to get it if you're basically saying it doesn't work? That's just, she's out there. And then I can't go after Scott Morrison anymore because the Australians have sacked him. He's no longer the prime minister. So I don't even know who the prime minister is. Yeah, they had an election a few weeks back. He's gone now. So it's hard. But I can still go after Dan Andrews, the ghoul of Victoria State down there where Melbourne's at. No, I don't. I mean, maybe somebody could suggest someone, but none of these people are legitimate leaders in my mind. None of them actually care about the people they're responsible for. They may claim to. They're all busy trying to reshape and remold the world in a fashion that suits them. Earlier today, I saw a video, which I did a short and then I did 2 shorts on it. And I put on my fatigue jacket and walked out with my fatigue cap to do a humorous one, then a serious one. And it was Max Boot, the author, the intellectual, who wrote, and he said that this is our war. Ukraine, the rules-based international system is under threat from Russia. To which I said, Max, when Russia invaded Georgia, and we supplied arms to Georgia, we had troops in Georgia at the time doing state bilateral partnership activities. Was that an existential threat? No, I didn't say all this because I only had a minute, but I just ran through this. Was that an existential threat to the rules-based world order? When the Russians used cyber attacks to try to destroy Estonia's financial infrastructure and undermine their banks and their currency, was that an existential threat? When Russia invaded its neighboring states and interfered in Armenia, in Nagorno-Karabakh, when they were involved in Dagestan, when they undermined the Azerbaijan government, Tajikistan, were these not existential threats to the rules-based world? They're not. They're not. Stop it. These are people trying to lead us to war. It's funny because these same people led us into a conflict as we were about to withdraw from Somalia and then got Black Hawk down because they had no idea what they're doing. So they ruined a humanitarian mission by turning it into a nation-building war. So Somalia, Rwanda they drug us into. We went into Rwanda. They drug us back into Somalia years later on under Barack Obama. They drug us into Libya under Barack Obama. They drug us back into Afghanistan under Barack Obama. The list goes on and on. They criticized the Bush administration and the neocons for taking us to war with Iraq. But the number of wars and conflicts that the Democrats have drug us into since 1990, the end of the Cold War, is astounding. And they have this cognitive distance. Why aren't we calling the liberals neoliberals? Give them a nickname because they love war. They love conflict. And why? Because it distracts from all of the failures back here at home and the reordering of the world, which is going on right now. It's pretty scary stuff.
It is scary stuff, and I think most people don't even realize what is actually happening. And it is definitely a new world order that is stepping in. And it's not a conspiracy term. That is what is officially called the new world order. And it's driven by these globalists in the private sector and in the political space who have vested interests in, I don't know, I can't figure out what it is, but every time I go down that path, it seems to be a definite depopulation agenda. And how they're going to go about doing that and bringing the world population down to 1 billion, which is more manageable, I don't really understand why they would want to do that in the first place, unless it's just to create a two-tiered society where they can live separately from everyone else. But what concerns me is the corruption of global world leaders across all different countries, and how easily they are manipulated by these external bodies. I mean, we're talking about Jacinda Ardern and Justin Trudeau. There's no doubt that they follow a globalist agenda set by someone else outside of their country, and that's dangerous times. And that also brings it to another point. Zelensky had a meeting scheduled for African leaders earlier this week, and invited 52 leaders from the African countries. Only 4 pitched up. Only 4 pitched up to his meeting. So you've got to kind of wonder, who didn't get the message? Was this deliberate? Is there something else going on behind the scenes? Is there some resistance to this? Or does Africa just not care?
Probably a bit of all of that. But, it's interesting because who exactly are we supporting there, Rob? I mean, I've been asking these questions from the outset, and that's not a pro-Russia position. It's not an anti-Ukraine position. Yeah. But the truth of the matter is this. We're giving $50-some billion to a country as a supplemental in addition to the billions we keep dripping out and the $2.6 billion we already gave them, all of which, if it had been delivered in March of 2021, there'd be no conflict because it would have shown deterrence instead of this stupidity. But this is a country that just banned its opposition party. This is a country that last week banned the use of Russian language. It's gone. It can't be used in music, can't be used in books, can't be taught in schools. It has a significant Russian minority. This is exactly one of the reasons that Putin gave for his invasion in the first place, is the oppression of Russian minorities. Whether it's true or not, it really isn't germane right now, because now it is true. The Ukrainians have actually fulfilled something that he claimed, and for the whole world to see. And we still have all these people. I billboard yesterday, came back from Harrisburg. We're with Ukraine. Screw you. Screw you, a corrupt country. You're trying to beg me for money to go there? No, I'm sorry. Here's the other one, Rob. We can ship in French artillery pieces. We can ship in ammunition. We can ship in tons of munitions. We can ship in armored vehicles. But somehow we can't get grain out of Ukraine in the opposite direction in the same trucks and trains. Now, how is that magical? Does the grain doesn't fit in the same kind of transport vehicles that artillery pieces fit? Because, they're specially shaped for that long tube. I mean, seriously, why is nobody asking this very basic question? Just like in February, 72 hours after the invasion, we already heard this. Food shortages. There's a shortage of wheat. There's a shortage of sunflower oil. Why? Because Ukraine's been invaded. Dude, it's February. The soil is frozen. There's no harvest going on. What the hell are you talking about? People fell for this. And what did they do? They went out panic buying, creating shortages and driving up prices. This is ridiculous. The United States is harvesting wheat this week and the next 2 weeks that they planted in November of last year. Winter wheat, we call it. We also have other wheat that comes in the spring. The winter wheat was planted before Ukraine ever took place. It's a normal part of crop rotation. Here we have maize, soybeans, and wheat in this area of Pennsylvania and much of the Midwest. And they rotate those to replenish the soil. And so there's going to be a bumper crop of wheat here. I go buy it every day driving around here. One, I can afford the petrol. And I see it every single day. Now, why didn't the United States, Canada, major wheat producers, retire their maize, which is wasted on ethanol anyway? Over half our maize crop goes to ethanol. What a ridiculous waste of resources. Why didn't we just plant wheat this spring? Because we knew there's going to be a shortage of wheat this fall because Ukrainians aren't planting and harvesting. So that's just nonsense. And what about Australia, one of the world's largest wheat producers in the southern hemisphere, which is in the opposite seasons? This is utter nonsense, this stupidity. And the European Union just set aside $630 million for emergency food aid. Why? Why don't they just go in with planes or go in with trains and pick up all the grain and ship it around? We're talking about these millions of tons. Give me a break. People are stupid. They don't ask basic thinking questions. When someone tells you this, ask them why. Not to be obstinate, but go, wait a second, if there's a food shortage, why? Because Ukraine was invaded. But Ukraine only accounts for 9% of the world's wheat exports. Oh yeah, but Russia, exactly. No one's buying Russian wheat. Well, why aren't we buying Russian wheat? We're starving ourselves intentionally to hurt Russia? They're just shipping it to China. That's just stupid. If they ship grain to China, then China doesn't have to buy it from Pakistan or from Australia. We can buy it. Why are people, this is a psychology course.
Yeah.
It
is. They are totally gullible. That's what I truly believe. People will believe anything that's told to them now. And it's terrifying. It's terrifying. I mean, we can even talk about the burning of 97 food processing plants in the US. What's up with that? That's insane. That is no coincidence.
No,
Absolutely
it's not. There's no way. One or two fires, but hundreds of fires across the states at not just the meatpacking facilities, 97. Abattoirs, not just that. Well, it's hundreds when you add in Amazon warehouses and Walmart warehouses. There have been several of those that have been torched as well. What is going on?
Cattle dying. What's happening with the cattle?
So the record temperature.
What about the sheep and the dogs and ducks and pigs and everything else? Why aren't they dying?
Why aren't deer dying? They live out in the same environment, with prairie dogs, or frigging groundhogs, big pronghorn sheep. They aren't dying by the thousands. There's something really, really. I mean, look, I'm waiting for the aliens to descend, man, because maybe they'll have some rational thought to this. I mean, we haven't had their help. We haven't had their help since they built the pyramids for us. We really need them to come back.
Chris, I wouldn't be surprised. If that's the next big scare. all these scares.
Planetary defense! Planetary defense!
Planetary defense.
We need one armed forces, a world council!
Exactly. And that's where it's all heading, because all of these global disasters, and they're all being labeled as global disasters, are paving the way for a global one world government, which makes the decisions. The UN, the WHO, the next crisis. The next thing is going to be, I really wouldn't be surprised if it is an alien invasion. Oh, they've invaded here. Look on social media. There it is. And everyone will believe it.
I've got my next. Well, it worked in the 1930s. Orson Welles did a radio program.
Yes.
H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. People actually freaked out because they thought it was real. It was so well done.
Yeah.
No, but I could see a social media campaign where you could convince people of that. I mean, I already have my idea for next book. First off, it'll be like a Jodie Foster contact moment. Somebody will be out there at the large array in Arizona. Oh, what's that? Oh, is it real? Check. Oh no, it's kids. What? We got a signal. Worldwide news. We have a radio signal from the Alpha Centauri galaxy. Oh! And next thing you know, we've been sent a come on, man. So now we need planetary defense. You need Starfleet. It needs to be based in San Francisco because it's woke and there's plenty of feces on the street to fertilize the city. Come on, man. Good Lord. Come on.
Fertilize the city.
That's right.
Oh, fantastic.
But folks, you're listening
to... What will happen?
Oh, it's coming. It's coming, Rob. Folks, you're listening to Answer the Question with the Wise Bros, Rob Hutchinson. That side, there it is. I always got to get backwards, cameras backwards. And Chris Wyatt, he's somewhere in an undescribed, unlocated rendezvous in Gauteng. And I'm in central Pennsylvania under the nondescript, it's not brick and steel, it's wood and paneling. But anyway, there's some brick here. Anyway, but welcome to the program, folks, where we take your questions. We've been looking in the chat. We've taken a few of those comments here. And thanks for the super chat there, John Jarvis. John made a point in trying to correct me, but actually he made a point which is valid, that when I said drug, he said that's a very American use of the term. The correct word is dragged. Well, no. The English usage of the word is dragged. That's not the correct word. That's how y'all use it. We don't use it that way. We say drug. Just like South Africans are confused and think that R2-D2 sits on every intersection and they call him a robot, we call that a traffic signal.
It's a robot. It says so on the road. It's even painted there.
I know. That's the first time I saw it. It was paint on the road. Wait, what the hell? What's a R2-D2? I was driving to South Africa 20-some years ago. Like, oh, my goodness. Yeah. As Steve E says, yeah, Soylent Green. Yeah, Soylent Green is people. Oh, what a movie with Charlton Heston, man. Soylent Green.
I'll make a note. I have not seen it.
You've never seen Soylent Green? Oh, man, that's a futuristic New World Order sort of thing that was made back in the 60s, late 60s, I think it was. But Charlton Heston, yeah. Good stuff. Soylent Green. Famous.
I'll give that a watch this evening.
Famous phrase. And then Corona says, aren't they really alien? Who? The world leaders? They might be aliens. And then Shinkendo.
We're not getting into that. This is reptilian discussion.
No. That's right. Yeah. I watched V. I remember that show, V. Diana eats the rat.
Yes.
Gosh.
That was a brilliant show.
That was brilliant. Yeah. The remake wasn't so good, but the original was something. For its time, it was brilliant with Mark Singer and all that. But Corona's Boring says, oh, no, not Corona's, Shinkendo, UK, said, didn't the U.S. government already confirm aliens? No, the United States government confirmed unidentified flying objects, not aliens. We have no evidence. The only evidence we have of aliens are Jacinda Ardern, Cyril Ramaphosa, Boris Johnson, Joe Biden.
And Chris Wyatt and Rob Hutchinson.
No, we're not aliens.
From a different planet.
Definitely a different planet. But, we do get all of our information that we bring to you. It's factually checked. We have fact checkers, and it all comes from the Book of Useless Information, just so you know that.
I've actually got a book. I'm busy packing up house, and I saw this book there of pseudoscience. It's absolutely brilliant, and it goes on. In fact, I'm going to bring it on to our next show.
You should.
Show you. I'll read a couple of stories out of there. It's amazing.
Corona's Boring says Soylent Green was set in the year 2021. I didn't realize. I thought it was like in the 23rd century. Wow, 2021, that's pretty frightening. Yeah, but when I was a kid, movies I loved were like Logan's Run. I love that movie. It was awesome. You ever seen Logan's Run?
I have not.
My gosh! Of course, you grew up in a
I'm missing out on something.
You grew up in a culture-deprived South Africa with one TV station with 2 hours of programming every day, and 1 hour that was the Dutch Calvinist Reformed Church.
we only got TV or a broadcasting station in what was it, 1977?
Good Lord! We had TVs in the 30s, man.
Exactly. We're way behind.
Yikes. Yeah. No, so the thing I was going to talk about with Ronaldo was today, someone made a TikTok video. It's being shared in the groups that Ronaldo has. And this young man who appears to be colored based on his appearance castigates Ronaldo because Ronaldo posted something, I guess, on Twitter complaining about YouTube creators. It's only if they're only promoting black content creators. So this guy basically says, Ronaldo, you have to sit in people of color's shoes. And my response to this is, why? Why don't you sit in someone else's shoes yourself, you snarky little smartass? And he's like, well, people of color have been denied access and promotion for ages. I'm like, YouTube only came about on Valentine's Day 2005, and I don't recall them ever hiding black content creators. In fact, they've been promoting them the entire time they've been around. So stop the nonsense. Of course, the argument is just like Kamala Harris, slavery for 400 years. No, it isn't slavery for 400 years. People distorting the facts to create a privileged underclass of victims, and that's what this is. And I find it the height of hypocrisy and bigotry for someone to say that Ronaldo needs to put himself in someone else's shoes and understand the pain of others when they don't even for a second consider that he has feelings and they should put themselves in his shoes and consider the argument from both sides. But they only expect you, this person, when I say they, this person, because I'm using the plural pronoun because it might be we, them, she, her, us, So they, this person, they, singular they, is only looking at it from one perspective and thinks that's perfectly all right. It just kills me. It just kills me how unintelligent so much of the world is.
It'd be interesting to find out how old that person was.
It looks like he's about 18 or 20, maybe a little bit older.
There you go. So that sets that record straight.
Oh, Rob, but I was never that stupid when I was 18. I don't think any of us were that stupid.
No.
Come on, man.
No, absolutely not. But what it shows is that he's not even remotely thinking for himself.
No.
He's going by the words of someone else.
Exactly.
Because he's not old enough to know when YouTube came about, when apartheid ended in South Africa or anything like that. So he's basically just sprouting rhetoric, and that's clearly obvious.
There's another South Africanism, rhetoric. It's rhetoric, Rob, rhetoric.
Rhetoric.
No, it's rhetoric. It's rhetoric. It's rhetoric. We say rhetoric. We say rhetoric. Yikes. Yeah.
Rhetoric.
Fletchin says Logan's Run, great film, but most of us would be dead by now. Oh yeah, because they killed you when you hit 30. I think it was. You turned 30, you had to get killed. So only young people could live. Oh yeah, that was the whole thing.
I have to watch this.
Oh yeah. No, it was. It had Peter Ustinov was in it. He has a cameo at the end. Michael York, one of his early films, heck of an actor. I don't know whatever happened to Michael York. He's kind of faded away, but really great actor in the 70s and early 80s. But yeah, I loved him in the Three Musketeers version he was in. But Michael York was in that Logan's Run. They're called Sandmen. Because what they do is people have a clock in their body and okay, your time is up. Go to the center where you'll be celebrating. They actually kill you with a laser. So and wipe you out. So you just go to your death happily, to keep the system going. And then people are like, well, wait a second, that's not right. You can live beyond 30. Anyway, so you got to watch it. Logan's Run, fantastic movie. It's probably free these days. I mean, it's probably cost you about as much to watch as, I don't know, a Leon Schuster movie if you can find one of those. Nothing.
If you can find one that hasn't been banned in South Africa. That's true, because everything that's slightly controversial gets banned here, especially if it's got a racial undertone, even if it doesn't have a racial undertone and it's just humorous. That's a terrifying thing about what's really going on with these new movements in around the globe. Is it's I love stand-up comedy. I really do enjoy.
Oh, it's dead.
A good
it's
couple
dead.
Of comedians. It's gone. It's absolutely gone. When you're in a comedic place and you're in that setting and someone's standing on a stage and telling jokes, you can expect the worst to come out because it's in the right context. But when people start complaining about it and saying he shouldn't have done that, he shouldn't have said that, please, really get over yourself. Stand up. Change your diaper.
Exactly.
And get on with life. That's what we're going to come. Why did you buy the ticket in the first place? Why are you even there? Why are you watching it? Come on, really. I don't understand that whole thing. Why do people complain so much? It's about what happens on TV. Pick up the remote, change the channel, watch something that suits you.
There's three things, and I call it culture of. First off, the first we saw was this culture of entitlement. I'm entitled to. You owe me. You haven't done anything. You're not entitled to anything. Culture of entitlement. Culture of aggrievement is what we have now. I'm aggrieved. I'm upset. And what's the third one? Now I lost it there, but there's three of them. So but there's these three different mentalities that people have. They're aggrieved. They feel entitled to things. And I forgot the third one. I should have written it down. But yeah, these three different cultures really come together in a toxic mix. And now we have the world just going every which way. And I told yesterday on Kinako with Koketso and Dumo, I talked about these idiots that are trying to destroy the English language. I saw a message that went around here. This neighborhood thing where we have a yard sale, or anyone know how you can get a plumber and that sort of thing. Talking to people in your neighborhood, but it wasn't here. It just covers the whole region. And some woman goes, "My daughter, they said this and they did that." I'm like, "Your daughter and who?" They're using woke pronouns, a plural pronoun, to describe the person's daughter. It's not they, she, you moron. Because now I read this and I'm wondering who the other people are that make up they. There aren't any other people. And imagine when there actually are other people that make up they. Then what is it? My daughter, they decided to do this, us, that. What the hell is that? Now these idiots are destroying the English language, giving it no value whatsoever, one of the most beautiful and functional languages. That's why it's so pervasive, not simply because the British conquered the world, but because people adopt it rather easily. They're destroying them. But that won't work in German, Rob. It won't work in German because in German it's der, die, and das, es, and sie. And all of those changes, whether it's the nominative, the accusative, the dative, the genitive cases. By the way, for you leftists that never learned grammar, those are the different ways that language is constructed. You have the nominative case, which is the subject. You have the accusative case, which is the direct object, which means I hit you. You're the accusative, I'm the nominative. And der becomes Dane. And Dane becomes Darren and Dason and Danen. And you can't do that in German. Can't do it in other, and I can get away with it probably in Afrikaans because you just have D, but anyway. But you can't get away with it in German and other languages, so this stupidity will end with the English language. But oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. And so I'm going to put my cap back on.
What about the French? You're going to put your cap back on. What about the French? I mean, the French language has definitely got a masculine and a feminine for pretty much every word out there. So what do you do then?
Well, French is confusing anyway, so they'll just make it more confusing. No, but the French won't put up with it. The French I find entertaining. So the French ban the wearing of the abaya and all the facial coverings in public locations, and they get away with it. They're called racist. They're like, fuck off.
So what? You English pig dog.
You dirty English pig dog. Your mother was a hamster and your father smelled of elderberries.
Way to go, Monty Python.
That's right. You dirty English pig dogs. I just watched the Holy Grail 2 nights ago. Oh my goodness. Dead. Bring out your dead. She's a witch.
It is a flesh wound.
It's just a flesh wound. Come back, you coward. I'll bite you. We are the Knights of Ni, and we want a shrubbery.
Do you think Monty Python could ever get away?
Oh no, they couldn't do it today. No. Well, I mean, look at their look. Oh, it's so sad because it's just so funny, and you know what these comedians do? They actually open up tolerance by letting people who are unfamiliar with another group of people actually learn about them in a humorous way. I mean, think about it. So so they did the skit where the one where they're, I don't know if you remember, this is not from the movies, but one of the shows, the Flying Circus. I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. I cut down, I cut down lunch and I go in lavatories. I put on girlies' clothing and hang around in bars. You couldn't do that today. So now you're.
Well, you could, Chris. You could.
Well, you can put on girlies' clothing, hang around in bars, sure, but you couldn't make a comedy skit about it. I suppose in that bar, I suppose.
In a kindergarten, you could.
Oh, as a drag queen. There you go. I hadn't thought about that. Did you see that Tom Hanks said, when he was asked in a press conference about could a straight actor play the role that he played in the movie Philadelphia back in 1993, in which he played a gay lawyer who contracted HIV and died in a very poignant movie. Now, I'll tell you why I watched that movie, because HIV is something I've been following, researching, and also had a close connection. My aunt was one of the first people who died from it. She was an intravenous drug user, unfortunately, and died from HIV in AIDS in 1985. So it's always been a subject that I've kept close. Anyway, so I watched the movie because it's interesting interested in the topic, but also because I like Tom Hanks. I was a viewer of his since he did the sitcom Bosom Buddies in the late 1970s, a short-lived comedy in which two guys dress up in drag to live in a women's dormitory so they can save on rent, along with Peter Scolari, the guy that was in the Newhart Show. But anyway, so Tom Hanks says, no, a heterosexual can play that. It's not right. Basically, my words, not his. It's cultural appropriation. Only a homosexual can play the role. Really? And he said, well, a straight person could be convinced. He said, the only reason people watched that movie and they accepted it was because I was in the role. No, I watched it because I was into the topic, not because you made it okay, and it couldn't have been a gay actor. I mean, honestly, so it's okay for homosexual actors to occupy the role of Alexander Hamilton, who wasn't gay, to occupy the role of Barney on Why I Married Your Mother. He's playing a womanizing, carousing guy, Doogie Howser.
I was just about to mention that. Only
to find out that Doogie Howser is as gay as a $3 bill. I mean, that's not good or bad. I'm just saying it's true. He's flamboyantly gay. So we're supposed to buy him.
Actor.
He's a brilliant actor. So we have to buy him so he's like, and then people are complaining all these gay actors can't get roles. That's not true. All the straight actors, all the straight roles in these Hallmark movies are played by homosexuals. Anybody can play a role. It's called acting, Tom Hanks. It's called acting. I played a German aristocrat in Der Bieberpelz in college, and it was convincing. I'm not an aristocrat. I'm not even a crowd. Ooh, that's a bad word. Anyway, I'm not even German, but it worked. Even though my German skills weren't particularly grand at the time, they were decent enough. The point is, it's called acting, Tom Hanks. It's acting. If you can take a black woman to play my ancestor, Anne Boleyn, and that's acceptable and it's not cultural appropriation, then a straight male can play the role of a gay male. I mean, Queer as Folk wasn't entirely populated by gay actors. There were straight actors playing gay roles there, and gay actors playing gay roles. So stop it, Tom Hanks. I'm so sick of this stupidity. If an actor is talented, they can play any role out there. Look at the diversity of roles that Michael Caine plays. The guy is absolutely brilliant. He can play gay, he can play straight, he can play gangster, he can play British aristocrat, he can play army officer, he can play everything under the sun. Spy, he's amazing. A talented actor is good at fooling you. That's what actors do. They fool you.
Exactly. I mean, that is the whole point of acting. If you want to get more roles or leading roles like that, become a better actor. Simple as that. Don't need to change anything else.
Yep.
It's you get these you get people who play dead bodies in a slab in some of these mortuary scenes. Do you have to use a real dead body, or can we use an actor?
That's cultural appropriation. You've offended the dead.
Yeah, exactly. And does their gender matter? I mean, really, it's the same thing. It is absolutely
my goodness. So Rob, the mask mandate has ended for now, and
Yes.
You still got this other case. But is there anything on the near-term horizon for DearSA that they're focused on, or any cases that maybe the public's not aware of that's still out there percolating that the public might want to know about?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that are floating around. There's the mandatory vaccinations in the workplace, which is governed by some certain labor laws, which we are putting on the back burner for now. We have spent a considerable amount of money on legal opinions and senior counsel already on that, but we're waiting for the outcome of this first court case to see if it affects the labor laws. If it doesn't, then we'll perhaps go through with that as well and challenge those regulations. Because remember, those aren't housed under the Health Act. Those are housed under the Labour Act, which is a completely separate piece of legislation, different courts and everything else. But nonetheless, needs to be challenged. Other than that, a couple of campaigns going on about the rising fuel prices, what we can do to restructure the fuel price and taxes associated to that. South Africans paying unbelievable amount of tax and levies on fuel, which makes up more than half of the price of fuel. So definitely have to relook at that. It's a tough one because government gets a considerable amount of income through taxation, which funds other projects. So it's not ring fenced for fuel or for roads or anything else like that. It just goes into the general fiscus. So yeah, there's a couple of others, local campaigns as well. But then there's also our Great Expansion project, which like mentioned quite a few times, and we recently won a fantastic grant from an organization called AGA, which is affiliated to the African Union, and we're expanding into countries there, into African Union member states, continuing the work. So there might be a Dear Kenya, Dear Ghana, Nigeria, and so on, encouraging public participation and engaging with citizens and the local governments there. And that's a huge step for us. It's absolutely wonderful that we have been awarded that grant to do that work, and hopefully it'll become sort of the last standing pillar of democracy throughout Africa, returning the power to the people who actually where it's supposed to be in a proper democracy. So yeah, a lot of exciting stuff, and well, the sky's the limit, and we're all loving it. The team has grown considerably, and we're taking on more and more cases, more and more supporters, and it's a wonderful time. It's quite amazing, Chris, how people tend to look at tough situations like in South Africa or even globally and see failures and risks and so on. But in my opinion, we are blessed with an inept government in South Africa, which creates opportunities for the private sector, for non-profits, and even individuals to plug those gaps that government can't do. And that's exciting time to be in this country. There are incredible amounts of opportunities to uplift South Africa from the bottom up, not from the top down, because that certainly hasn't worked in the past.
Well, that's well stated, Rob, and I'd have to say that I'd have to concur with your point there. We're also faced with inept lunatics on this side of the Atlantic who we know they're doing things in violation of law or the Constitution intentionally, and it's so easy to expose what they're doing. The only frustration I sense from that is that while that creates a lot of fertile ground for civic engagement and for exposing government hypocrisy and failure and lawlessness, which is great, keeps us busy now, I think it distracts from some people who should be strategic leaders looking at 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. I might be wrong in that, but I definitely get the sense that a lot of people who should have some focus down the road aren't. They're focused on the near term because there's just so many challenges. So I think it's a dual-edged sword, but it just means you need good leaders. You need the right leaders in the right place. And in the civil society side, they're probably there. They're not maybe as prominent as we think they are, but they're certainly not sitting in the halls of governance in countries around the world right now, or in corporations for that matter. It's very disappointing, distressing to see what direction corporations have gone. When you see a company that has no long-term vision, it's very frustrating because, and this is one of the reasons why I try to get companies in America interested in investing in Africa. I mean, 2050, 2.4, 2.6 billion people, 900 million people in a consumer class, nearly 3 times the size of the United States' entire population today. We're talking about a treasure trove of disposable income that someone's going to get their hands on. Africans, Chinese, Brazilians, Europeans, and the Americans are just sitting back going, other than Boeing, Caterpillar, Microsoft, and Google and Amazon, there's no Verizon, there's no Comcast, there's no, well, there's UPS, but there just aren't American companies there. They're just not doing it, and we're going to be a second-rate economic power for that reason alone. That's where the growth is coming. Most of the growth in Asia is plateaued. Asia has grown; its population is beginning to decline, and there'll be more wealth in Asia, but the numbers of people adding to the pile of wealth won't be growing significantly. All that growth is coming in Africa, not Latin America, not in Europe. Europe is dying, not dying off, but dying. Japan is dying, not dying off, but dying. The United States is plateauing. We're not declining, but we're plateauing. So Africa is where the focus needs to be, and it's just not there. And it's really frustrating to see that lack. So I agree with you. There's lots of opportunity. We have incompetent governments, but I worry that we don't always have the strategic leaders who are looking long term. Hopefully DearSA has that, and you guys have that leadership.
No, hopefully we will find that leadership. I don't think we'll ever get into politics. That's just not our thing. I've been in politics, and I had a short stint there as one of the top 4 in COPE. But no, for what I learned from that short stint is that you cannot get anything done. There's too much bureaucracy, any decision goes out for too many people to decide, and everybody within the party is out for their own vested interests. I'm not saying just that party, every political party.
What's the nature of political parties? It just, unfortunately, is the nature of them. Well, you talked about something that's actually long-term. You're looking strategic. You're talking about expanding and delivering the services that DearSA brings to South Africa elsewhere. And we talked about Dear PA, but you're also talking about Africa. So my question is this, Rob, is that actually when you said where you're going, I was a little surprised. I thought that maybe DearSA would play to its strengths and go to Namibia, Botswana, maybe Zimbabwe, although that'd be a very painful space to work in because the government is illegitimate there, and it oppresses the population. But Botswana is certainly fertile ground, maybe Zambia, Lesotho. I thought you might go to those places, but you mentioned Kenya and other places. Is that because you're looking at a different vision, or you already have a foothold of ideas there and people, or because the grant that you got wants you to go into those particular markets? What's the motivation for that?
The motivation is, I just sprouted names off the top of my head.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No,
All right.
I'm kidding. We do have interest from those countries that I
okay, they've expressed interest. Okay, they've come to you.
They've expressed interest.
Okay,
yes.
Well then that's certainly okay. Well, I'm just curious. Because Kenya is a great example. I think Kenya and Nigeria, although Nigeria would be a tough place to work too, but Kenya, there is a lot of interest in civic engagement in Kenya and a lot of frustration at the political circumstances there. So I could see Kenya being a place. Now Tanzania has the same frustrations, but it doesn't have the discourse in the public space that Kenya has. So I think Tanzania is probably a decade behind. That doesn't mean you can't go there. I'm just saying that's just my analysis. I think it's a little bit.
We've actually had interest from Tanzania as well.
Really? Okay.
So yeah, it's quite interesting. There are a couple of groups that won the same grant, and one of them is from Tanzania. So yeah, it's quite interesting. It's a fantastic time because it's I don't know. It just creates a sense of ownership amongst people, being involved in their democracy, and knowing that they can actually influence the outcomes that government wants in policy formation. So yeah, it's great. It absolutely is great, and we're really excited about it because it will pave the way for operations anywhere on the globe in the same fashion. And I think now is the opportune time for that, because everybody's got accustomed to understanding policy formation, especially during COVID. People are aware of the power that policies and regulations can have over people, and they're also aware now that they can get involved and shape those policies to prevent unfavorable outcomes at the end of the day. So, yeah, the non-profit sector and the NGO sector is definitely shifting, and it's shifting in a good way. And that places two problems, or maybe one problem and one good thing. The problem is governments will start clamping down on non-profits and NGOs, either limiting their scope of work or limiting the ability to do work or to raise funds. There's no doubt that's going to happen. And how non-profits prepare themselves to be future-proof is I think is greatly important. They need to figure out how to still operate, perhaps from outside the country, if required. And also funding. It might become illegal to fund non-profits and NGOs. So another fundraising problem and sustainability problem facing them. But if non-profits and NGOs all work together, if civil society operates as one and collaborate on projects and avoid competition, which is present in the corporate world, I think we'll have a very strong movement that governments will listen to and realize that they can't just push them aside.
It's interesting what you say there, Rob. There's an interesting point. Obviously, people who grew up in the Soviet bloc, the East Bloc countries, who overcame oppression and got their freedom at the end of the Cold War, they certainly appreciate this. A lot of immigrants from Eastern Europe who come to America are just gobsmacked at how people can embrace communism and socialist ideas. People who've escaped Venezuela and Cuba come to America are like, you guys are nutters. How could you possibly want that for yourselves? But most of us in what I'll define, and if people take offense, fine, take offense, because it's a general term and it's applicable, in the Anglo-Saxon world. We're talking about the United States, Canada. Then we throw Japan in there. It's not Anglo-Saxon, but it's a similar sort of environment. And maybe even South Korea these days. South Korea has really moved in that direction. But Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. And yes, I know there's Nguni languages, but in the sense of the legal construct in the developed world, Anglo-Saxon world. Most people in the Anglo-Saxon world don't really appreciate. Now, South Africans, many of them do have an appreciation for this, so I don't mean to really lump it in there. But most people really don't appreciate what a government can do to them and what it can take from them because they haven't experienced that. I'm talking about post-apartheid in South Africa, not pre-apartheid. So the rest of the Anglo-Saxon world, they've never experienced that. I mean, unless you've been a victim of eminent domain where the government needed your property or wanted your property and evicted you from it, you really haven't dealt with your freedoms and liberties being extinguished. But now you have. And I think that an awful lot of people in that part of the world are actually awake, not woke now, and realize the hazards of not being engaged politically and civically. All politics is local and everything is political. I don't want to hear that sports aren't political. That may not be the intent, but when someone takes political action, it becomes political. Agriculture is political because winners and losers are chosen and created by states instead of allowing the marketplace to function properly. So I think that you're onto something here that and in Africa, a lot of Africans, I think, are even shocked at some of the excesses. I mean, people in Botswana are angry, very angry at their government. Now, they're not expressing it on social media because they're afraid they're going to be prosecuted. But I know people in Botswana, and I stay in touch with people there, and people are very angry at what's been going on there. And that plays out across the continent. And a lot of people who took for granted what they had until it was taken away, I think they're awake now. And I hope they're awake because it really needs to be dealt with, because otherwise we'll all be standing there in the tower going, "You silly English big dogs are fought in your general direction."
Exactly what it is. And it's a slow process as well. And before you realize it, or when you realize it, it's already too late. You should have taken action before.
It's gone.
It's very difficult to undo unjust laws and policies that have been implemented by a government. So the best thing to do is try and influence those by getting involved and having your say, influence them before they're actually implemented.
And actually, I would argue that my focus on South Africa has been apropos because South Africa has become unjust in their quest for equality and justice. The ANC has become an unjust government. And quite frankly, the world needs to expose them because the world is looking through rose-colored glasses at April 27th in 1994. Kumbaya, all-race elections. South Africa is a burgeoning democracy. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Oh, it's all restorative. We've all forgiven. No, there are serious warts there, and you have a government that is actively preying on its citizens, black, white, brown, and otherwise, a government that creates racial preferences, a government that uses patronage. And I'm not talking about the National Party. I'm talking about the ANC. That's the irony here. So I think that my focus on South Africa and trying to expose what's going on there to people around the world has been apropos for the last 2+ years, and there's definitely a space for it. And South Africa can lead the world in exposing its own shortcomings and correcting them, getting rid of race-based legislation because it was morally wrong under apartheid and it's repugnant now. I mean, under apartheid, a minority was oppressing a majority, an incredible feat. Yeah. But now a majority is oppressing a minority. What recourse does a minority have? At least a majority could rise up in numbers and overthrow, but a minority can't do that. It's vile. It's horrible. It is. And they're not just repressing minorities, they're repressing all South Africans. And that's the sad part about it. So I think that my programming has been apropos, and I'll put that feather in my bonnet and claim that success.
Thank you for that, Chris.
You're welcome.
And it's well-deserved. Absolutely well-deserved. And you're 100% correct again. It is, if you want to fix South Africa, the first thing you have to do is get rid of race-based policies. Simple as that. Exactly. They haven't worked. Almost 30 years now, they have not worked at all. And they've created more division than anything else in this country. And get rid of them. Let's focus on building the economy and creating wealth for anyone, creating skills. I'm never going to say create jobs because that's such a political football, and it's ridiculous.
Governments don't create
jobs.
They destroy jobs.
Government.
No.
Exactly.
Yeah, they can't create jobs.
So create the skills.
Well, create the environment, create the ecosphere that allows for. I mean, Cyril Ramaphosa came to office talking about, bringing $100 billion of foreign direct investment in South Africa. He said that because it sounded impressive. It's 15 billion rand, right? Or no, 150 billion rand. 150 billion rand sounds really impressive. But what sort of foreign direct investment? In platinum mines, in software technology centers, in solar photovoltaic plants, in agricultural, in genome typing, in mobile phone production. What is it? It matters. I mean, if you bring $10 billion into the mining sector, you're going to create a handful of jobs. It's an extractive industry. If you, on the other hand, come in and bring a company in that is focused on, agricultural research, you may create a few jobs, but you create jobs with high value, with high profit margins, and you have ancillary businesses that spin off of that create an entire ecosystem. Silicon Valley in California is not a mistake. It was by design. It was intentional. The same thing in Massachusetts when we have all of the software companies and IT companies up there. It was intentional. North Carolina has the 3 university towns, and it's known as the it's known as the Research Triangle of Chapel Hill, and you've got Durham, Raleigh, Durham. You've got that triangle of research institutes that were all fostering IT, software, medical research, pharmaceuticals, and it is all paid off in spades. And now North Carolina is not just a center of IT and pharmacology. It's also a banking center, a massive banking center, and these things feed on each other. South Africa can do the same, but you need to focus. And just $100 billion of foreign direct investment doesn't mean anything to me. And by the way, it hasn't even come remotely close to that. After 4.5 years, he's only about 17 billion. Most of what he has already promises were there before they even announced that they're going to have this goal. It's just you have to create an ecosphere that is promising for this. And you can't do that when people have to hire security guards to protect their business so it isn't robbed. You can't do that when they have to build their own power stations to provide electricity so you don't damage their computers by surging voltage coming and going from Eskom going down all the time. You can't do that when your employees are robbed, murdered, and raped and their cars stolen, they can't get to work. You can't do that when you have the world's highest HIV positive population and you lose people every week to death from HIV related illnesses and everybody disappears for a funeral for a week. You can't be a productive society when you promote people to university based on 30% performance in 2 subjects and only 40% proficiency in their first language. That is not a literate, functional person. South Africa is not a competitive workplace, and that's what you have to fix. And you don't fix that with BE. You fix that by pouring money, resources, and qualified, talented educators into primary school education, into secondary school education, and you produce freaking flush toilets in the Eastern Cape. 30 years later, they're still not there. You have schools with electricity. You have schools with chalkboards. You have schools with resources. And you fix it by fixing crime with public policing. You fix it with proper education. You don't chase educators away because their skin color doesn't comport with your racist view of the world. The fact that so many Afrikaans-speaking teachers who were qualified were chased out of education in the late 1990s and the odd decade of the 2000s, left South Africa bereft of qualified educators because nobody was trained behind them to replace them. So we get a situation in KwaZulu-Natal where 75% of the primary school or the middle school teachers, primary school, were HIV positive in the early 2000s. And what do you do in that part of the country? Well, most of these teachers sleep with 11, 12, 13-year-old girls for grades. And what do? They damage them mentally, psychologically, with early sexual relations. They impregnate them. They spread sexually transmitted infections, including HIV, and kill them off. I know so many sad cases of Botswana where girls were raped by their teachers and died before they turned 16 years old from HIV, before antiretrovirals were out there. You don't fix society by having these cancerous leches and having these failed policies. These are easy solutions, and that doesn't take trillions of rand. It just takes commitment and honest politicians, not a racketeering organization whose main purpose in life is to see how much they can eat off of the teat of South African society. And I could go on with this rant at a mild pace without an outrageous screaming for another hour, but I'm going to take a break right there, Rob, and give you a chance to jump in.
Oh, I don't know where to jump in there. That's absolutely brilliant. You've said everything that I've always wanted to say. It's absolutely wonderful. But yeah, that's exactly it, Chris. It's priorities that are so skewed that they don't even know which way they're going anymore. And because they don't know which way they're going anymore, it's all become self-centered, self-enrichment, and feeding at the trough. It's clear that the ANC no longer cares a crap about South Africans and their citizens.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely clear.
Everything that comes out of their mouth is just
worrying.
total bullshit.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the big problem that we face in South Africa. How do we change that? How do we get people in power? I hate using that word, in power, because they're not in power. They're there to serve. How do you create public servants who actually enjoy their job, enjoy uplifting others, and focus their life onto that? I don't believe you can in such a bureaucratic environment, such as government structures and politics. I truly believe that the initiative is going to emerge from the ground up, from communities taking it into their own hands, becoming less dependent on government. Quit waiting for bailouts and handouts. It's not going to solve anything. Become less dependent on government and become more self-reliant. Build strong communities. Local businesses should all be banding together, and we've seen that. We've seen that with a couple of local medical aids that are now launched a pothole service, which is a private enterprise actually fixing public roads, which is wonderful. We need to see more of that, not just public roads, but anything. And it's the smallest thing that counts, but makes the hugest difference at the end of the day. We cannot rely on government. It's been almost 30 years of disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. Time to take matters into our own hands in a positive fashion and rebuild by ourselves.
And I don't disagree with that. In fact, I had Jacques Boudric on. We were talking earlier. We talked about this, and I published that interview. And that's exactly, a great guy. That's one of the things we talked about, is people reach out and do things. But there is a problem with that, particularly in a socialist state like South Africa. That government will, when they see something lucrative that they've ignored and the private sector's moved in, swooped in, and delivered the service, they will come in and pass legislation that makes it the sole purview of the government. I mean, the fact that you can't have a private power generation industry in South Africa is disgraceful because the government can't deliver. They've proven it with Eskom. It doesn't matter who you bring there. De Ruyter, it's not his fault. The disaster he inherited is going to take forever to fix. And the way they're dividing the company into three different entities, which all rely on each other, is not a solution. It's actually more opportunity for patronage. But anybody that has $1 billion that wants to build a coal-fired power station or a solar thermal station in the Karoo should be allowed to come in and build it as long as it meets environmental standards and hook it into the grid and sell their electricity to whoever wants it. But private power producers are limited in what they can do. They just up the amount to so many megawatts or a megawatt. But that was restricted before, and really only people could put stuff on residential properties with their homes and small businesses. So that's a problem. So if you develop the world's best pothole fixing company and it fixes roads all over KZN, it's just a matter of time before the government wants to horn in on that and then claim it's theirs, and then they'll fail again, just like they've done this. So I see where South Africa is going, and I appreciate it, but you always have to be ready for a court case against the government trying to intrude in that space. And I think that's a critically important piece. And there was another point I wanted to say about this. I keep senior moments today that keep slipping away from me, but it'll come back to me probably after off the air. But there it is. It came back. The light turned back on. The LED came back on. It was a little loose connection. Let me plug it back in. So the LED's back on. Rob, some of that's happening now. Some of the change is already happening. We talked about people getting involved, yada, yada, yada. But the way you turn this around, the way you right this ship is with accountability. And you mentioned something earlier. You said that Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma is going to be held personally liable for court costs. Well, there's a good first step. Next good first step is a trial for Dr. Zweli Mkhize. Charges of corruption for the Digital Vibes case. And then there's the actual following through and completing the cases against Julius Malema for assaulting a police officer at Winnie Mandela's funeral, for discharging a firearm, and then hiding the evidence. That's a crime in and of itself. That trial come to conclusion. And then Ace Magashule, and then Zandile Gumeda. Those are first steps. It takes the courage of the judiciary to follow through and complete these cases. We did see some of this courage when, Zuma tried to get Billy Downer thrown out and nope, there's no justification for that. But then, of course, he comes back with another appeal and this goes through all this. But accountability and then shaming the criminals, exposing them, and prosecuting him. That's how you start to deter and dissuade this stuff, and you turn the ship around. But it's a big ship, South Africa. It's stuck in the South Atlantic, caught in the currents, dragging it towards the Antarctic, towards an iceberg, an ice shelf. It's going to take a lot of pull from civil society to turn the ship and head it back in the right direction and sail past Shell exploring for natural gas offshore, much to the consternation of the demonic leftists who are all rich white liberals.
Exactly. We all live in Cape Town.
You like that image? Did you like that imagery I evoked there?
That was wonderful. It was wonderful because I could actually picture it because it's exactly how it is. But you're right. It's going to take a lot of work. And we mustn't be afraid of that work, because what can come from it is something beautiful. It really is. This country has so much potential.
Oh my goodness!
So many opportunities. And we just need to get rid of the bureaucracy, get rid of these ridiculous policies, and just carry on and become the innovative powerhouse that we used to be, because we certainly were many years ago.
Can you imagine, Rob, a society that promotes all of its official languages and doesn't denigrate them, and it promotes the history of the Xhosa and the history of the Khoi and San, a Khoi museum located in the Western Cape, celebrating the history and origin of the Khoi people and the San people. You know, a museum dedicated, a theme park dedicated to the Griqua people, or to the Orlums, or to all these other people. A museum that tells the truth of South Africa, how the Bantu peoples arrived and they migrated down the Rift Valley and brought cattle culture with them, and yada yada yada. I mean, that just alone from a tourism standpoint, and harnessing people's abilities and focusing on standing up and improving people instead of breaking down people and stealing from them, and bringing public safety back, and pride in the country, and not just pride in the rugby side, but pride in Bafana if they could ever win a game. You know, pride in the Proteas, you know, if you get rid of all the racism in the Proteas, and not the racism they claim is there, but the actual racism by racists claiming racism. You know, South Africa has boundless potential. Titanium, diamonds, gold, although it's very expensive to dig out now, it's hard to get to, platinum, cobalt. The list is endless. Natural gas now, we're finding there's probably tons of gas in the Karoo you could get out for fracking. And the endless, boundless solar potential, and I'm not a green energy lunatic, but there is solar potential there in South Africa, not to mention lithium and a rare earth element mine, and all the human capacity that's being ruined. And not to mention, if you made the place a wonderful place to live, the millions of South Africans who would probably come back to South Africa from New Zealand and from Australia, where they have buyer's remorse, living in the penal colony, or from the UK, although you might not get them back. They're kind of comfy in the UK or the US. But the point is that South Africa has endless potential, and it's all been squandered by a party focused on corruption, theft, demonization, race hustling, and lying about South Africa's history. It's really sad. But we're at an inflection point, Rob. I think we're at an inflection point in 2022.
We are.
And it's time to turn this thing around.
Absolutely brilliantly said, Chris. That is exactly... That's why I say you got to look at the opportunities that are presented by such situations and stop looking at the downside of everything or the tragedy. We all know the problems are there. We all know they exist, but let's see some real solutions emerging here. And they're not going to come from government, not at all. It's not in their best interest in any way, which is mad. I really don't understand it. But I suppose I do. It's all about self-enrichment and at the expense of the public and expense of citizens. What we really need to see is the end of any ruling party. I'm not referring to the ANC. I'm referring to a party that's in power that thinks they should be ruling. No, we need to see the return of serving parties, whoever they might be.
Well, and in fact, let me just bring that straight home and make the point. Last week, Emmerson Mnangagwa told Zimbabweans that the ZANU-PF has the right to be ruling into perpetuity. You have an obligation to vote for us. We brought you freedom. Wow. First off, that's a bold-faced lie. You know, that's not what happened. And they didn't bring anybody freedom. The British put the pinch finally on the Rhodesians, and the numbers were working against them, and so they gave up. They weren't defeated in the field, and they didn't win liberation. That's a lie. The number of people who fought for Zipra and Zanla who lost their lives because of foolish military tactics is in the tens of thousands. The innocents who were murdered by Zipra and Zanla in the bush, that's also in the tens of thousands. The horrific things that happened to black and white Rhodesians and Zimbabweans is really... But I mean, they have a right to rule in perpetuity. Nobody has a right to anything into perpetuity. Nobody. Anything. Anybody that makes such a claim is just a fraud. And of course, the crocodile, Emerson Mnangagwa, is an original fraud. I love how when he was illegally installed as president, because he had fled the country to go to South Africa after he claimed that they tried to poison him at a county fair. So he fled to South Africa and he resigned as vice president. How Constantine Chiwengo in a military coup brings him back and appoints him as president. He's not even a member of the government. That's illegal. And nobody even bats an eye. And he's part and parcel of this nonsense. He served for 37 years in that corrupt government, and now he's been in it for what? Since another 5 years since 2017. He's in 40 years of rule. He's going to be ruling longer than Mugabe before you realize it. Now, it's nobody deserves. No one has a God-given right. Monarchies don't have that, and if they think they do, they're wrong. This is the age of reality, and we need to, bring that reality and shine light for the world to see these corrupt officials. The ANC has no right to govern in perpetuity. In fact, in my view, they have no right to govern today. They've proven they're incompetent and unwilling to govern. Brett asked a question a few minutes ago whether the DA could ever become majority party. Anybody could become majority party in South Africa. It's just the circumstances, the leadership, and how you catch on. The DA has a lot of baggage. Some of it legitimate, some of it a consequence of false media narratives. But it might be someone like ActionSA that comes up out of nowhere, or a party that it came off like COPE. But the problem with COPE, and Rob can weigh in if he thinks I'm wrong, the problem with COPE is that it was primarily disgruntled Thabo Mbeki supporters who left the ANC. That's not a good basis to start a political party. You're right. So, just be honest here. Not that that's wrong, but it's not an enduring thing. If your reason for forming a political party is because you're bumhurt the way that Thabo Mbeki was treated, okay, you got a fair grievance there. The Polokwane massacre, as I call it, that's what I call that. There's a fair grievance for that, and I don't like Thabo Mbeki, by the way, but what happened was wrong. So there's a fair grievance for that, but that's not a basis for continuing. You've got to have a vision. You've got to have an end state. You've got to have a goal where people are going. And COPE may have thought they had that, but they didn't articulate it very well. And as a consequence, eventually people frittered away. Rob, is my assessment invalid? You know it from the inside. You were with COPE. Like you said, you're one of the top four.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. It was a great win when they did actually win such a huge.
Yeah, they got 7.5-8% of the national vote. That was amazing.
It was amazing, absolutely amazing. The problem is they didn't maintain it, and it's difficult to maintain it, and that's the most important thing for any political parties is retention of those people. They moved over for a reason. They saw a vision. They had hope. COPE gave them hope, but COPE let them down at the end of the day, which was understandable. It was there's a lot of talk about internal sabotage, and no doubt there was, but that's never an excuse, really. If your vision is strong enough and your leadership is strong enough, then they could have dealt with that as it went. But I think that it took them by surprise, to be dead honest. We suddenly have so many supporters and such a large percentage of the votes. You tend to get a bit of shell shocked and it's like the dog catching the car.
What are you going to do now? No, I think that's a very apropos analysis there, Rob, and it dovetails very well with my assessment. I think that's, the dog has caught the car, you got it by the bumper. Now what are you going to do? Car's driving around with you biting on the back, you're just clenching on. And you know what? I think there's a hazard there for ActionSA. I think the same thing. Yeah. Herman Mashaba has gotten some traction in Gauteng, and they want to go national, but it hasn't gone quite the way they thought so far. It's early days for them, but ActionSA has to prove they're more than just Herman Mashaba's grievances against the DA. Most of the people they seem to be gravitating to ActionSA, from my analysis, now that's not perfect, it's anecdotal based on what information out there, but it seems a lot of their support is coming from angry, disgruntled DA members who are going to ActionSA. Yes. And again, that's not a model for a successful party. It's not. Now, a party that has a great opportunity that is based on, a group, but really has never grown out of that group, but has a great potential if they just take it somewhere, in my view, is the Inkatha Freedom Party. I'm not saying they're doing a great job. I'm just saying they have great potential. The party structures are there. They've had dynamic leadership under Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who is he's an octogenarian now in his 90s. I think he's had COVID 3 times. The guy's amazing. But so he won't be on the stage forever. But they have an opportunity with a structure there. Will it survive? Will it continue? And they've been handed a golden opportunity because of the ANC's collapse in KwaZulu-Natal because of the insurrection and all the other things. And so the Inkatha Freedom Party only gained 1% more vote or something like 1%, I think it was. but they gained control of a bunch of municipalities by default because people didn't vote for the ANC. They stayed away from the polls, which lifted the IFP's percentage and gave them control either directly or through coalitions. They have a grand opportunity to prove to people in KZN, black, white, Zulu, Afrikaner, English, whoever you are, that they can rule in these municipalities, which could show them to be quite effective. Whether they do it is up to the IFP. It's up to them. The one party that really has an opportunity here, if they do well, although they don't control any municipalities, is the Freedom Front Plus, but they're still a small party. They still carry the baggage of being perceived as Constantine Villon and racist and white supremacist, none of which is true in my assessment. Certainly not the current instantiation of the party, and hasn't been probably for a number of years. But if they can sell themselves to people, because they've been honest and their platform is pretty much centrist, there are some right of center things, the Freedom Front Plus has an opportunity. But any party could rise up in this situation. People, when they're angry, don't always look for the perfect solution. They just want an answer. And sometimes a charismatic leader can rise, Adolf Hitler, and coalesce and bring people to his standard. Let's hope it's not an Adolf Hitler that rises in one of these parties.
No, we need a benevolent dictator.
That's right. Well, look, I've always aspired to be a benevolent dictator in Africa, but my target was Lesotho or Eswatini. Now, Lesotho is great because I like snow and I like to hold water over South Africa, hold them hostage and make lots of money off of selling you water. So Lesotho was always high on my list. Plus, I have a lot of respect for the Basotho people. They're similar to the Tswana people, and I like their reverence for firearms and how they defend themselves in mountains. So it's always been top of my list. But Eswatini has always been a close second because, the reed dance, I get to pick young maidens to be my wife every year. I'm liking that. Bare-breasted young ladies every year. I'll take that one and that one. And, it's a close second. But you know what? I can be convinced to become a benign dictator of, a secessionist cape or, maybe even a Gauteng on its own. I'm just saying, Rob. I'm available.
And maybe that is the solution. Maybe that is what will happen. We'll see secession of the Western Cape and probably KZN. It might actually be the solution.
Well, people. Okay, so here's an interesting thought, Rob, because we could go for hours. We probably should wrap up soon. But here's an interesting thought, which some people have kind of tossed out there. They didn't say it in this fashion, but I'm going to say it in this fashion. We've been hearing about for several years Cape secession, and there's different groups out there. There's the Cape Exit Party, and then there's the Cape Independence Advocacy Forum, and there's all these different things. 3 major groups out there. But what happens if the Zulu secede from South Africa? Not KZN necessarily, but Zulu land. And maybe KZN is a larger thing. What happens if that takes place? One of the most important ports in Africa goes with it in Durban. And what happens there? That to me is not an impossibility. That's a very real possibility that if while the folks in the Western Cape are looking at secession, they try to do it, it's actually Zululand or KZN that does it. And if the IFP consolidates its control and its governance over municipalities and they're successful, they can make an argument for it. I'm not saying they're going to make that argument, but the Zulu nation stands as good a chance as anyone. They own 2.8 million hectares. The king does. He controls it through the Ngioma Trust. There's a lot of legitimate basis to make the argument that Zululand or KZN could secede before the Western Cape ever does. Just a thought. Any thoughts on that one?
No, absolutely. I think it's a realistic thought. To be honest, I think it'll happen before Western Cape secession.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That no one's saying that, and I'm suggesting it's possibility. You just said you think it's possibility. Yep. All right.
Absolutely,
so, folks, June 23rd, 2022, in 2025, when it happens, you come back and look at this video and notice that it was shadow banned and we only had 60 concurrent viewers instead of 600 we should have had, and only 800 views instead of the 80,000 we should have had. And remember, Rob Hutchinson and Chris Wyatt, the wise bros, told you well in advance what's going to happen.
That we did.
Oh my goodness. Hey Rob, let's wrap up, brother. Any final thoughts? And then we'll wrap it up.
I'm all good. I've talked quite a lot here for once. I think we both did. It's always a wonderful show to get things off our chests, I think, in more ways than one. But yeah, I think the secret to fixing this country, to fixing any country, is take the power into your own hands. And I'm not saying get violent and protest and destroy things, but just fix situations yourself. And that's the secret to success. in my opinion.
Excellent thoughts. Erica said that if the Western Cape and KZN gone, they lose all three ports: Cape Town, Durban, and Richards Bay. Yeah, I was trying to picture where Richards Bay is in my head. I think it was Eastern Cape or KZN because it's the largest coal exporting terminal in the world. So the good news for the ANC, who likes to kowtow to the climate zealots, is that if they lose Richards Bay, then they won't be able to export that coal, so it'll stay in the ground and they won't have to worry about carbon emissions.
Yeah. Two birds with one stone.
There you go. All righty, folks. Rob Hutchinson, always a pleasure. Thanks a lot. Twice this week. We've had a double feature here with you, and people really tuned in for the previous one, so thanks a lot. Hey, folks, check out my shorts. I got no, not the ones I'm wearing, my YouTube video shorts. Some of them are getting traction. That gasoline one, when I was called dumb by some leftists because I simply pointed out the price of gasoline went up 4 times in 24 hours. I don't know why that's dumb. It's amusing or entertaining or frustrating. That video just went over 12,000 views while we were on air here. So, that's not impressive compared to the old channel, but on this shadow band channel, that's actually pretty darn good, and it's still getting views. So please watch my shorts. I did one on the Supreme Court decision. I also did 2 of them, one in a satire about Max Boot and his war drums over Ukraine, wearing my hat askew on my head and my camouflage rain jacket, and then I did a more serious one. So check out those. And you can check out DearSA if you want to get involved in civic engagement. The links are below the video. Go check it out, all these different links to DearSA, and learn what they're all about and get involved in South Africa. So Rob, from here in central Pennsylvania, from Rob and his Rondeval there in Gauteng, thanks a lot, and we'll catch you here next time, folks, on Answer the Question, The Wise Bros with Rob and Chris. Rob, cheers, brother.
Cheerio. Thank you very much.
All right, I'll put both of us in silence there, and we'll use the rollout camera there. Do a little bit differently than I usually do. So I'm still talking, and the audience can still hear me, but they can't see us. So now I'm going to play the closing credits. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care of yourselves.